Jen.
Hey, Dana.
Hey,
Hi,
everybody.
everyone.
Welcome to Hypnosis.
And beyond. Today we have Dr. Cameron Alldredge. He's a psychologist, researcher at Baylor University in mind body medicine.
Hey, Cameron.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Cameron.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are
Yeah.
thrilled for our audience to get to learn a little bit about you and some of the highlights of what brought you here to Hypnosis and Beyond today.
So I am a licensed psychologist. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. And so I just live here in Texas, and I have a private practice where I do a lot of hypnotherapy stuff. And I also work full time. I'm employed by Baylor University. I work as a research scientist for the top hypnosis research laboratory in the world. So, one of the world leading research labs on clinical hypnosis right here at Baylor University. And so, I have the pleasure of every day showing up to work and doing things that I would do it for free. So, jokes on Baylor, I guess, because I get to just read about hypnosis, do hypnosis, write about hypnosis all day, every day. And it's an absolute dream. I get to teach some classes. I also work as a forensic psychologist. And so usually I'm doing court-ordered evaluations on inmates and people to see if they're competent to stand trial or if they qualify for not guilty by reason of insanity plea. So I do a lot of that as well. And just recently had fun because my hypnosis expertise got to overlap with my forensic psychology work, and I got to be an expert witness on a case that kind of centered around somebody recalling false memories about a shooter in hypnosis, and the court using that as evidence to convict this person. So it was kind of a fun way for those two worlds to collide for me. So that's who I am now, and that's what I do.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, answer me this. You have the PhD in psychology, and yet you spend a lot of time in the hypnosis space. Tell us a little bit about how those two are complementary and maybe how they're different.
Yeah, so it's kind of neat because in the academic or like the licensed mental health professional world, there is a strong group of people interested in hypnosis. So there are two professional organizations that are exclusive to licensed healthcare professionals. So that's the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis. That's one of them, and the other one is the Society for Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis. They have great membership of other people who are also a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists that are interested in hypnosis both experimentally and clinically. So there's good overlap there. And actually, one thing that a lot of people don't know is the American Psychological Association, or the APA, kind of this governing body that does a lot of accreditation for psychologists. They have a division. It's Division 30, which is the Society for Psychological Hypnosis. So there's a division within APA that is solely dedicated to hypnosis. So there's a lot more hypnosis in like the psychologist world than what most people might assume. So it fits nicely, and I get to do a lot of fun work in all those different spaces. So
That's fascinating. I don't think most people would know that I feel like there's been a little bit of tension between kind of the two modalities, so that's really interesting to hear.
yeah, yeah, they fit nicely together. So.
And so then tell us a bit about the research stuff. Are you literally sort of poring over journals? And I mean, what is that? What is a day in the life of a researcher?
Yeah, it's fun because every day is different. So I was just chuckling to myself recently because we have a pretty big research laboratory here with different rooms and different spaces for us to conduct different experiments. And it's not uncommon to be, walking through the halls, and you might see a room with the door open and there's people doing like a hypnotic induction and, testing different suggestions. And one thing our laboratory does a lot of is working on measuring and accurately measuring hypnotizability or someone's, ability to respond to hypnosis. So as part of that, we have students and grad students and undergraduate students learning how to do inductions and to measure someone's hypnotizability. So that's something we do a lot of. Our lab also does a lot with treating specific issues like postmenopausal hot flashes, helping people improve their sleep. There's a bunch of different clinical applications that we're always researching. We just finished up a study where we looked at a hypnosis app that is designed to help women reduce their hot flashes post-menopause. So we ran like 80 participants, had these women, listen to these audio tracks and follow through this hypnosis program on a mobile app. And we're in the phases now of like looking over the data and the statistics. So that's just a short slice of samples of what we do currently in the lab.
So interesting. Now, how involved do you get to be in some of the choice of studies, like the topics that are studied? Is
Yes,
that work?
yeah. So we have a director of the lab, Dr. Gary Elkins, who is our fearless leader. And then we have an army of graduate students and then an even bigger army of undergraduate students who volunteer and help us out with the studies. And I'm kind of this weird position where I'm not the director, but I also already have my PhD, so I'm not a student. And so I used to be the postdoctoral fellow, but now I'm just the research scientist. So I'm just kind of the assistant to the director. And so I get, luckily, a lot of fun opportunities to design studies. And the one that is like my baby right now that I worked on since it started, and I'm kind of the main guy for it, is we're doing a study right now using a hypnosis protocol that I created that facilitates a mystical experience or like a psychedelic experience without any psychedelics. So we've done some pilot testing with it. And so right now we just received a grant for $500,000 to do a big 2-year study of, can we, with this hypnosis intervention, facilitate these mystical or psychedelic type experiences for people, and can it lead to improvements in their life? So that's the main one I'm doing right now, and it's fun because I have seen the idea from its beginning all the way now to where we're starting to implement it on a big scale. So, yeah.
So is the goal of the mystical or psychedelic experience, is that because there is data to show that makes long-term change, or what, why that?
Yeah, it's great. So psychedelic assisted therapy is really popping off in the field of psychology right now. There's a lot of interest in it, and it's gaining a lot of traction. So one of the big debates in that field right now is it the drug itself, like the chemical compound of the drug, that's leading to these great benefits and these positive changes that we're seeing? Or is it the very powerful and transformative experience people have while on the drug? And so our study is going to help answer that question, because we're giving people that powerful transformative experience without any of the drug. And so we can kind of tease apart, like, okay, is the drug an important element of, people receiving any long-term benefit? Or is it really just, the drug is giving them this really powerful experience, and that's what's doing the work? So it's kind of a fun question that we're trying to answer there.
How does the powerful experience differ from other just sort of traditional hypnosis, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, where the person is having a transformative experience? Uh, Sort of, what's the difference, I guess?
Yeah, so mystical experiences they're a type of experience that occur in non-ordinary states of consciousness, and a lot of people agree that hypnosis is a very, useful tool to help someone enter into an altered state or a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And so once somebody's in that state, there's all sorts of different things you can do. They're going to be a lot more open to hypnotic suggestions. There's different powerful things that can happen. And so what a lot of, I think, hypnotists do is they'll use that non-ordinary state of consciousness to help people with powerful and helpful hypnotic suggestions that are tailored to whatever goals that they have. And so that's great. That's a transformative experience. The mystical experience is a little different in that it's usually very spiritual for people. They feel this sense of like it's the sacred experience where they feel connected to everything in the universe, like this fundamental power of the universe. Some people explain that to be God, others something else. It's usually this experience that just like transcends normal perceptions and normal consciousness. And so for a lot of people, that experience of like being connected to nature and everything and having these really positive emotions welling up inside, that is for them, this mystical aspect to it. That's a powerful catalyst for change, which kind of differs from what we use in traditional hypnosis of, providing them with these hypnotic suggestions for whatever they're trying to work on. So
Interesting. So it sounds a little bit like traditional hypnosis is more connecting to themselves for the change, and maybe the mystical is connecting to something bigger than themselves.
yeah, that's a good way to say it, actually. Kind of there's this transpersonal element to these mystical experiences that make them so powerful, whereas maybe traditional hypnosis is very just focused on the person, helping them with their specific goals right then and there. So that's a good way to put it.
Hey, no problem.
Yeah.
Jen, I know you're looking to jump in here. Please, I don't want to.
Yeah, well, one of the questions I have is that who is funding these? Like you said, there's $500,000 going into this. Are these coming from private or public benefactors?
Yeah, so our lab, the one for $500,000 is from a foundation called the Templeton Charity Foundation. And so they fund a lot of these types of like wellness studies of looking at spirituality and sometimes even religiosity for different things. And so they were interested in this spiritual aspect that we're tapping into with this study. And traditionally, though, our lab, for a lot of the clinical studies that we do with hypnosis, they're funded by the National Institutes of Health, so the NIH. So it's a lot of government funding, and we've received millions and millions of dollars for different studies over the past few decades in our lab to do a slew of different research studies looking at hypnosis helping specific problems.
Great. So the more you get these positive results, are you finding more psychologists and therapists are using them in their practice regularly?
That's kind of been an interesting element, is we see that the impressive results that hypnosis usually pretty consistently gets in the peer-reviewed research is lagging behind its actual use and implementation by licensed healthcare professionals. And so and what I mean by that is like, actually, I'll put the statement in a quote that's in one of my favorite research articles written by a psychiatrist out of Stanford who has a lot of good hypnosis research coming out of his lab. He says in one of his papers, based on the good research we have on hypnosis and the outcome studies that have been done, especially when it comes to like pain and stress management, if hypnosis were a drug, it would be the standard of care. Kind of this idea, like, because like hypnosis works so well for people that if it was a drug, everybody would just be prescribing hypnosis. But obviously it's not a drug, and so drug companies can't make money off it, so it's not that way. But it has that caliber of impressive results. And so really the clinical application of hypnosis is not to the degree that it should be based on the research.
And that's interesting that you're dealing with things like sleep and obviously if we get better sleep, it leads to maybe not having these more serious issues. So, just opening people up to that idea would obviously be beneficial in people's daily lives. eh, you
Absolutely.
know.
What is
So,
something,
yep, go
piggybacking
ahead.
on what Jen is asking, what is something that you've learned in that study that perhaps our audience could integrate into their lives? Is there a nugget of wisdom you could share? Or
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the power of self-hypnosis is very evident in a lot of our studies because we, for example, we'll run a study where, people meet with a therapist for 5 sessions of hypnotherapy, but then they are given these audio tracks to listen to kind of do these self-hypnosis experiences throughout the week. So it's not just when I'm in the therapist's office, that's when I can, experience the benefit and impact of this treatment. It's like, no, I can do this at home. I can do it in the moment that I'm feeling that I need it. I can do it in my own convenience. And then pretty soon I can do it without the audio track. I can just remember and kind of re-experience these benefits at any time. And that's really empowering for people because then they can start to do a lot of the work on their own. And that's where they're going to see the best change. So that's kind of my takeaway from a lot of the research we're doing is just how much power each individual has. Where a lot of hypnotists, I think they go too far the way of like, I'm the all-powerful hypnotist and you got to come to me because I can do the best job and whatever. But really it's giving the power back to the patient. And so that's something I wish people knew better.
so one of the things that you said, I think the term gets thrown around a lot, and that is peer reviewed. Can
Hmm.
you explain to the layman what does that mean? Is your
Yeah.
friend sitting next to you and reading it?
Uh, I guess that's a funny way to say it, but it's basically when you submit a study that you've done, like you write it up into a scientific article. And I've gone through this process a lot of times. I'm actively in this process right now. You'll submit it to a journal, and then that journal typically will select 3 expert reviewers on the topic. So they will send your unpublished paper to usually 3 reviewers who are in the field actively, also doing their own research, are deemed experts. And then they go through and they usually will absolutely eviscerate what you've written, just like completely destroy it. Maybe that's a bad way of thinking about it. That's how it feels to me. but but it's good constructive feedback that we need, and so they'll just like poke holes in all the things that you say and question your statistical analyses, everything like that, and then the editor of the journal will send it back to you and will say, hey, you're not quite there. We're not going to publish it yet, but if you listen to the feedback of these 3 experts and kind of implement what they have to say and revise it, you can resubmit the manuscript to us and we'll consider it potentially to be published at that point. And so I've had some articles I've published where I go back with them like 4 or 5 times. I'll implement all their suggestions and I'll send it back and they'll say, it's good, but it's not good enough. So you got to go back and make these additional changes, and we'll go back and forth. And I serve as a reviewer on a lot of hypnosis articles, and I try to be as tactful as possible to try to improve their paper and make it as scientifically sound as possible. So that's the peer review process, is that you are getting reviewed by your scientific peers. And once there's this kind of consensus of like, okay, it's in a good enough state, then it can be published in the journal.
And how does being in this world affect your private practice? You said you see people one on one. So do you feel that has kind of shaped the direction you take with? I suppose you say patients, right? Because you're a
That's right.
PhD.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh, yeah, it's interesting because my interest in all of this started out first in hypnosis. So I started back when I was like 14 years old, just enthralled with hypnosis, obsessed with it. And then had a fairly successful stage hypnosis career for a few years before I got to this tipping point where I said, I really like hypnosis. It is a powerful tool, and I think it has a lot of therapeutic applications. And so I made a decision right then and there, kind of the shift of like, okay, I'm going to go get a PhD, become a psychologist, research it, use it clinically, and abandon entertainment with it altogether. So from like one day to the next, canceled all shows, didn't do any more stage hypnosis, and just then dedicated myself to the actual like academic and clinical use of hypnosis. So it's a little backwards where I started off, I got my PhD because of my interest in hypnosis. And I always knew that was in the back of my mind of my goal of like, okay, I want to use hypnosis in this way. So I'm going to go become a clinical psychologist. And so it was more of like fitting clinical psychology into my already existing interest in hypnosis, which is, I think, backwards for a lot of people, but it worked well for me.
Was it kind of like the idea that you were already seeing these results on stage, and was it a way of like validating it or legitimizing it?
Yeah, it was this idea. I think you're exactly right. This idea of like, wow, this tool can be such a powerful experience for people, even when I'm horsing around with it in an auditorium full of people. If this is like in a one-on-one therapeutic setting, how much better can it be to just improve people's lives and help them with different symptoms they're experiencing? So yeah, it was definitely this idea of, this. And then when I get into it and I'm like, oh, wow, there are entire professional organizations who are made up of just PhD level psychologists who also see hypnosis as this awesome tool that can be very helpful for people. So that was, like you were saying, this validating experience of like, yeah, there are other people who also see it for what it is.
So do you think more and more, like as you said, this could be seen as a standard of care? Do you think more and more people are recognizing hypnosis just generally when you're meeting them? Is there less fear, say, around it, or skepticism?
Yeah, we've actually we have a couple of grad students who are looking at, they're giving surveys to people, and we're wanting to do research on different groups of people, like their attitudes toward hypnosis. Like one student in our lab is doing one on veterans. So veterans being treated through the VA system, what is their attitude toward potentially being treated via hypnosis? And we want to see like how receptive, how open are they to it, and what's the pulse in the community on hypnotherapy. And so that will give us some good information, and I think it'll tailor how we approach it, because one hard thing about hypnosis is we have a lot of years of baggage that we kind of have to help people get over. And a lot of people, as I'm sure you both are very aware, a lot of people have very weird about what hypnosis is and how it works and how it feels, and so there's a lot of stuff and a lot of mystery and myths around hypnosis that we have to kind of work against in order to help people be open enough to try it to help them. So it's a bit of a balance of like, yes, I think more and more people are becoming open to it, but there's still so much misinformation about it that pervades general opinions. So that's what we're fighting against.
Well, how do you define hypnosis?
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question in the academic field. So the APA Division 30 that I mentioned earlier, so the division of the APA that's dedicated to hypnosis, they came out with an official definition of hypnosis about a decade ago that a lot of academics agree on. There's a lot who disagree on it, but for what it's worth, the definition that I often work from is that hypnosis is a state of consciousness characterized by it's a state of consciousness involving a focused attention, reduced peripheral awareness, characterized by an enhanced capacity to respond to suggestion. So if we break it down, it's basically saying that yes, hypnosis is a state of consciousness It's where people are highly focused. And with the reduced peripheral awareness, that just means like things going on around them just kind of fade in the background. They become unimportant. And then they have this increased ability or this enhanced capacity to respond to suggestions. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I think it defines nicely what hypnosis is. Like, it is the state of consciousness. They are usually highly focused. And the whole thing about hypnosis is that they're responding to hypnotic suggestions, and we like to think that they can do that better when they're in that state of consciousness. So that's the definition I work from.
And so in your private practice, do you use inductions? How do you work with clients?
Yeah, totally. Everything I do in my private practice and all the experiments we do in our laboratory, they all involve hypnotic induction. So it's hypnotic induction, deepening techniques, just the same way as a lot of other people use it. So we use it in that very traditional way. Yeah.
And do you specialize in certain things in your private practice then?
Yeah, it's kind of been all over the place. I really like helping people with performance enhancement, like athletes, and just like helping people get over whatever performance barriers that they have to get to the next level. And so that's, if there's anything that I do most of in my private practice, it's probably performance enhancement.
Well, that brings us to our next segment, which is our silly subconscious question. And Mr. Cameron, our question for you today is, what's a word that's just fun to say?
Ooh. A word that's fun to say, the one that came to mind that I have to be true to is nifty.
That's a good one.
Nifty. I don't know why that came to mind, but that one is fun to say, nifty.
Yeah. Do you use that a lot in your everyday life?
I should probably use it more. Yeah, now I say it, but I remember I said it a lot as like a teenager. I don't know why, but it was like a favorite word when I was a teenager, so not as much anymore, but maybe I'll bring it back.
And we always like to ask our beyond question. Love to know something that beyond what we've discussed lights you up in your daily life. Is there some kind of interest that you have, or?
Yes. There's a few things, man, my mind is just spinning with all the things that I've been working on lately. Two things come to mind. One is this crossover of hypnosis and breathwork. I think there are some folks who are starting to get into that, but at least in the academic field, there hasn't been much research or any inquiry into enhancing hypnosis or hypnotic approaches with specific breathing techniques. I think breathing is usually a pretty key part of a lot of inductions that people do. They'll, ask people to slow down their breathing or to become aware of their breath. But some of the more intense breathing techniques or like breath work exercises that people engage in, like the Wim Hof breathing, or like people are deliberately hyperventilating. I'm curious to see, because the research shows pretty consistently that those types of breathing patterns can lead to those non-ordinary states of consciousness. I'm wondering if you add that to like a hypnotic induction and you add hypnotic suggestions to that, if the two can kind of complement each other. Does it make breath work more powerful when we add elements of hypnosis to it? And does hypnosis become more effective and more powerful when we add breath work to it? So that's something that I'm thinking about lately. One of the best things about my job is that I have one of the top hypnosis scientists in the world just a few doors down from my office. I was talking to him for like 45 minutes today just before I came on the show with y'all. And it's so fun to just like workshop different experiments in our mind to answer some of these questions. And so just yesterday we were talking about this idea of I'm interested in can breath work enhance hypnosis? And he doesn't think it could. And so we were kind of, having this lively debate about this question. And I said, okay, what study would I have to design in order to convince you that it would work well? And so we, designed this study right there on the spot of, well, we'd have to give them, these measures of hypnotizability. And with the breath work, if we give them the intense breathing exercise and they score in the moderate or high range of hypnotizability, whereas before they didn't, then I'd be a little more convinced that maybe there's something there. So it got me motivated. Now I'm like starting to think about, okay, how do I start to squeeze this in all my free time that I have to try to do this study, because I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious if there is something, and this is what he told me yesterday, if there really is something out there that would significantly enhance our hypnosis interventions and our hypnotic inductions, then yeah, we want to know about that. But before we jump in, we need to really dig in and do some high quality research to answer that question. So that's one thing I'm thinking about a lot. And another one is we recently published a book this past year called Hypnosis and Hypnotherapy, What You Need to Know. And we've been thinking about how do we get that in more people's hands, because it was written, it's kind of a cool crossover where it's all science backed. Like at the end of every chapter, we have the articles and the references supporting everything we're writing about in each of these chapters. But it's written in a way for the everyday reader, for just the general public, anyone who's interested in hypnosis, whether to do it or to be treated with it. It's written in a way that is easy to digest for them. So we're trying to think of like, okay, we were brainstorming this morning. We're like, okay, we think that we've kind of exhausted our resources in these professional academic hypnosis fields and these worlds that we're in. So how do we get it out to more people? And so that's something else, like in the beyond of like what I'm thinking about right now is like, okay, we have this great resource that we worked so hard on and that we are really proud of. How do we get into more people's hands? So those are the two things that came to my mind.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know we're going to have more questions for you at a later date. So come on back now. You hear? And with that, Jen, what do we always say?
Peace out.
Peace out.
Peace out.